All right, so let's talk about REST. So these URLs that we've been creating so far, we could use pretty much whatever we want, right? It's just a path, and some of the elements of the path are static, right? They're literal strings. Some of them are placeholders. Some of the things we can pass as query parameters. Some of the things we can pass in as part of the body. What should we use? What would be the best use of all these various ways of sending data, retrieving data, right? So REST is well, it stands for representational state transfer, and it's a style. It's an architectural style of suggestions, best practices that after a couple of decades of implementing lots of these APIs, we have identified some best practices on what these APIs should look like. Okay. So, for instance, one of the couple of things that we should identify is that whenever we are manipulating any piece of data, basically there's only really 4 operations that we would ever do. Right? We like to be able to create data. We like to be able to retrieve data. We like to be able to update data that already exists, and we would like to remove data that already exists. Other than that, there's really no other operation, right? Perhaps you might consider creating relationships between 2 pieces of data, perhaps as a separate way. But we'll talk about that in a minute as a subset of one of these, right? As a special case of one of these. So those are the 4 operations, the CRUD operations, right? When we say CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. So the architectural convention is that to create, we're going to use the HTTP post. For reading, we're going to use HTTP get. For update, we're going to use put. And for delete, we use the HTTP delete. Right, so that's a convention. Right, that folks that want to say, when they say this is a RESTful API, everybody says, okay, I know. Right, this is the style that we're going to be using. Many APIs that say are RESTful are not really RESTful. They don't follow these conventions. They just like the nomenclature or the cachet associated with the token REST, right? Being RESTful. All right. So the idea beyond using these particular verbs for the different CRUD operations, RESTful services also establishes a convention on how to deal with objects, right, and the data model that you are trying to expose or you're trying to retrieve that is exposed by a server. Here is a generic set of classes that are related to one another in a one-to-many relationship across a data model. So A is presumably represented by some table or some set of records where you have multiple instances, A1, A2, A3, and so on and so forth. And for each one of those A, there might be multiple Bs. So A1 might have B1, B2, B3, B4, and A2 might have B10, B20, B30, and so on and so forth. Yes? And then each one of the Bs can have many Cs, and every C can have many Ds. Yes? This creates a data set, a hierarchical data set, right? Where you can, any node, you can then fan out onto multiple other data sets. And what RESTful likes to be able to do is I want to be able to navigate the entire data set. Right? And since it's hierarchical, we need a mechanism that allows to encode hierarchical relationships between data sets. Right? So the idea is that that each one of these instances of objects would have a unique identifier, right? That it's unique within that data set, right? So there's every instance of A has a unique identifier. Every instance of B has a unique identifier, not across A and B. Right? So there might be one A with ID 1, and there might be also B with ID 1. But if the B with ID 1 is unique within the set of all Bs. Okay? So here's the generic idea, right? That if you are trying to if you're trying to create a new instance of A, right, you should use the following URL. Well, first you need to use post because you're creating a new instance. Yes, and if you are and and you want to refer to the entire set of A's. So you say I am adding a new instance, right? A123, and I'm adding it to the set of all A's. Right? So you refer to the set of all A's by /A. /A refers to all sets of A. Make sense? The other one is, for instance, I want to the get /A would be interpreted as I want to retrieve all the instances of A, right? Because get is for retrieving, for reading purposes, and since you're not telling me what A you want, it must be that you want all the A's. So /A always refers to the entire data set of A's. If instead you want a particular instance in the data set of A, you need to follow it with some unique identifier as a path parameter. Not a query parameter, as a path parameter. Right? And the reason that you want it as a path parameter is because you want to use the natural syntax of paths, of slashes and paths, that has a natural mapping to hierarchical structures. Just like you would use in a directory structure that would allow you to navigate all throughout multiple paths in a directory structure, which is a hierarchical structure. Same thing here. You can navigate an entire hierarchical data set using paths. If you want to update an existing record, you would say /A and then the actual record that you want to manipulate or update. In this case, I'm manipulating the record whose unique identifier is 234. And by the way, the data, the new data, is provided as part of the body. So the data is in the body. Same thing in the post, right? The new instance is in the body. Get doesn't have a body. Get doesn't have a body. I know it's going to have a lot of you is going to try and send up a body using a get. It's not going to work. So put, updating an existing record. And finally, delete is the same thing, /A/345, meaning I'm removing this particular instance from the set of records. Make sense? Pretty easy, right? Notice that two of the URLs are identical, /A, and 3 are identical, /A is followed by an ID. The patterns are identical. The only way that the endpoint distinguishes them is that some of them are gets, some of them are puts, and some of them are deletes. That's how it distinguish between what are you trying to do. And each one would be mapped to a different function, right, implemented in the web service, in the REST controller. Excellent. So this is manipulating a single entity, a single data set. What about relationships between data sets? For instance, the relationship between A and B. For a given A, there are multiple B's associated to that one A. Well, here it is. If you want to create a relationship between A and B, right, you would post, right, to A/123/B, right, and say there's a relationship between A and B, and the new B that you're creating, the new B that is now part of A, of that particular A, would be part of the body. Here's the new B that I'm creating. Oh, and by the way, its parent is A123. If you want to retrieve all the B's, right, that belong to a particular instance of A, right, you would use get /A/234, and then all the B's /B. Make sense? Yes.
So these are essentially conventions that we should follow.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So when I say create a RESTful API, right, I mean this. Right? You would follow these conventions. Right? It's a style. It's widely used in industry. Right? Again, there's nothing that stops you not following these, right? But then you can't call a RESTful service. Okay. So how about if I say /A123/B, that's all the B's, right? But I can go further and say, well, I don't want all the B's. I want a specific B under A, right? So I ask for B/234. Now, by definition, B234 has to belong to A123. It would make no sense to ask for a different B that doesn't belong to A123. Yes. So to avoid this inconsistency of asking for something that doesn't actually belong to somebody, notice that 234 is already unique within the data set of B. So putting in front A123, it doesn't make it any more unique, right? Is enough. The 234 is enough, so it would be perfectly fine that you would instead use the second query /B/234. You would only ever use /A123 if you, for some reason, in your calculations, you also need to know who the parent is. Okay? But that would be fine. But that would be very easy, typically in Java, since these relations are typically bidirectional. So by fetching the B234 typically would also have a reference to its parent. So you could say, who is my parent? Oh, A123. So typically the second one would be enough to answer that question. Yes?
Could it also be possible that the way we are referencing B, if suppose instead of the ID we are referencing a variable which is not unique in B, in that case we need to have numbers?
You mean B/234, 234 not being unique?
Yes. So if instead of that, then suppose we're referencing the name, and the name is not unique in that data set of B.
Yeah, no. So you would only use unique identifiers to navigate for asking for a particular record, right? So, for instance, if you want to retrieve folks that have a particular salary or are within a particular salary range, yes. So that's where you would use queries in the query string. So in the query string, would allow you to use filters. That would say, okay, give me all the Bs, all the employees. Well, no, maybe it gives you 100,000 employees. Well, no, I don't really want all the employees. I only want the employees that were hired between these dates, right? So those filters would not be part of the path. Right? Instead, it would be part of the query string. The query string would be used to filter, right? And you would say, hire date greater than, and then some value, and then hire date less than, and you could create all sorts of Boolean expressions that would then be parsed by the function and then translated to some query. Okay. All right, so let's create a little example on creating new courses, creating new modules, lessons and topics and whatnot. Okay, all right, so let's do that.